God. All right, Zach. What are we talking about?
So, what's the name of this?
I don't know what the name of this is. We haven't come up with a name yet. Have
Uh,
we? Were there names?
no, we haven't come up with a name yet. Like, the first one you came up with was Best Guess.
Best guess?
Best Guess, and basically that's just because all of this is off the top of our heads.
Pretty
Like,
much.
we have a computer right here, but we're not using it.
Not currently. I still think we should fact check at least
We
some
yeah,
stuff.
like if I say something that you're like, okay, wait a minute, let's take a step back.
What do you mean if you say something? Of course you're gonna say
Yeah,
something.
when
I'm
I
gonna
say
have
something.
to fucking check it.
And but yeah, just for the flow in general, we can just start off with things that we know reasonably, just
Right,
off
I
the
mean-
top of our heads.
That's true. I like best guess. That's not a bad idea. I'd forgotten that I suggested that, but yeah, I like that name.
Well, I can't think of any others really.
Nothing prevalent, at least.
No, I want a title of something that have analog in it because I just like the idea of analog, just technology in general. Anything analog is.
I mean, that's fine, but what is it? I mean, you want the title to have analog in it?
Yeah, and like just because the idea of analog.
But how would we even portray that idea? This is a podcast. It's so very, very not analog.
Exactly. Well, like it'd be like not analog because we're doing a podcast, but then when you like listen to podcasts now, there's a lot of it's like entertainment. It's entertainment, and like this is also entertainment. But at the same time, I like our conversations because it's a little bit deeper than just like entertainment, like just goofy stuff.
Right.
We're-
No, neither of us are particularly goofy in any
Right.
like overwhelming fashion.
Right. Yeah, we're both very dry, like not
Super dry
and-
humor.
and
Definitely a
that's-
little dark too.
Yeah, and that's fine, and like I like that, and the way I'd want the show to go is more us like discussing topics more in depth, and that's just something like even when you see Joe Rogan and they have like intellectual conversations, it's Joe Rogan. Like I love
Right.
Joe Rogan.
He is a comedian. At the
Yeah,
end of the
exactly.
day.
He's
doing
a comedian
it for.
first. Mhm.
Yeah, I agree with that. I do like the idea that we're not necessarily just gonna sit down and shoot the shit. Like that maybe we find like actual topics to see what we can talk about.
Right.
Because a lot of the reasons that I don't enjoy listening to most podcasts is because it's literally just people sitting down talking in a room.
Yeah.
And they're not moving a conversation forward. They're not trying to learn anything new. They're not trying to like change their worldview or understand it any better.
Well, that's where some people like podcasts is they like the idea of like, oh, these are my friends. Like, I know these people. When they listen to the podcast of people sitting in a room shooting the shit, they're like, I'm there with them, just listening on this conversation. But like, you know me, we work together.
Right.
I want to talk. Like, I want to just talk.
You certainly
about,
do like talking, yeah.
Everything. I like digging deeper into topics. I like exploring ideas. And like whenever I listen to podcasts, I do enjoy listening to people shoot the shit. But then there's times where I would rather like chime in because similar to us right now in the best guess format, this is just off the top of our heads.
Right.
And then like you listen to certain things and just off the top of your head you're like, wait a minute, that doesn't sound right.
Yeah. I do that quite often. I have a really critical sense of
Mm-hmm.
being, I guess. I like to criticize things. I like to find flaws with most
Yeah.
things I hear. So a lot of our conversation is me poking holes in whatever wild statement you've made that day.
Right, and it keeps me honest. And like, because with some other people, I can literally just say whatever I want, and they're like, Zach knows what he's talking about. Like,
Sometimes it gets so out of hand.
but that's I enjoy it. Like
Yeah,
because I like again with certain people who don't really understand what I'm saying, it's funny to like just say some really crazy shit, and they're just like, oh yeah, he knows what he's talking about.
That makes sense. I'm like, no, it doesn't. What are you talking about? Holy crap. What did you just say?
Yeah, and then I'll say things with you, and you're like, wait, no, you gotta run that back. What did you mean by that? And you're like, okay, don't ask me that. That's Because I know what I meant, but like I don't want to tell you.
But not in so many words, you know?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. What was that thing you wanted to do the other day? Oh, I loved it. It was great. You wanted to become a gypsy. That was the thing.
Yeah. Because right now, I stress myself out. Like like I said, I constantly talk about things. I look at whatever's happening in politics, um, and like I want to fix things. And like you said, we're here to talk about ideas, talk about like topics, want people to learn and
Right.
engage with the material, and that's what I try. I try to get people to learn, to understand like what it is that they're talking. Like that's where the analog like that's where I
I
wanted
still
to fit
don't
in.
think that's applicable.
No, I don't think it's very good for a title. I'll fit it in somewhere else, like down the line.
We're just gonna keep bringing it up. And today's analog topic,
Yeah, exactly.
where it doesn't even work.
Like-
Just like that doesn't make any sense.
So you're saying your topic is out of date or what? No, it's just no.
It's very manual, you know.
Yeah. Well, okay, so there we go. Like, that's something that's a good like metaphor for how people kind of engage with ideas now. It's the difference between driving a manual car and an automatic car. Like, yes, they're both cars, and you can.
I mean,
drive them.
I could get behind that idea where people are kind of just automatically replying as they
Mhm.
know instead of thinking about what they hear or,
Right,
or
exactly.
analyzing. Yeah, I get that feeling a lot. A lot of the conversations that I have, and I'm usually pretty quiet, so most of the conversations that I have with other people are them talking and me agreeing or
Right,
making a comment here or there.
Exactly, and you're very good at like playing off of ideas, which is why whenever we have conversations, you can take my ideas and then like take them a little bit further, or like make me analyze what I'm saying.
Like the terrorism balloons.
The- well, yeah, we'll talk about that later. This is episode 1. I want people to like me first.
Fair enough. Yeah, that might be a little jarring.
But
But I feel like a lot of people don't have, I guess it's a pretty stereotypical thing to say, but an open mind to branching out into topics that make them uncomfortable. Like, even if we're talking about, we've talked about like Hitler and Stalin and
mhm.
all kinds of different political views, even the Trump versus Biden at the moment, which is the hot topic. But even though we both feel a certain way about that, we are able to usually objectively say, like, okay, well, this was a good part of this, or this was an interesting way that, Stalin created his empire. He created his
Right, exactly.
dominance.
And that's what I was saying. That to go back to the gypsy thing. That's what I was saying is like, I was making a joke because I want people to engage with ideas. I want to explore different topics, like even for the more like darker stuff. Like, obviously, none of us support Hitler or Stalin or
Right, of
Mao
course,
or
no.
anything, but you can go back and see what led to those things and figure out how to not make it happen again.
Right.
And
Objectively saying that Hitler was a good politician or was,
Mhm.
helped Germany, those things are technically true. Whether or not he was an evil ass bastard, like,
right. And we can actually look at how he used sentiments of Germany to further his own political agenda, which then in turn was morally wrong. Like,
of
where
course,
he,
I mean, it was morally wrong, but it was technically a stroke of genius. Like,
Right.
he played it very well. He and his cohorts, I suppose that would be.
right.
But okay, so relevant to the gypsy thing, why do you feel like the gypsy joke would be beneficial to other people? Like, what would that do?
Well, so
you-
it's mostly for like the people like you and me, where I try so hard to convey certain ideas to people, even just like on a day-to-day basis. Like, even when we talk about things, we get very thinky, and I start talking to other people, and like they think it's interesting, but they don't wanna go further into it. They're like, because as soon as you start talking about actual history or like actual politics that may be parallels in today's society, they get uncomfortable, and they're like,
Oh, absolutely.
I'd rather talk about like a shoot the shit podcast, like
Right.
something that's just that shallow, very friendly, and when I make that gypsy joke, it's basically saying like, no matter what, there's like multiple options, and one of the things I could do is just like not work. Just I'm not gonna like
get in your caravan.
I'm not gonna categorize all gypsies as not working. It wasn't specifically a gypsy joke. It was mostly just like, you know what? Instead
I guess
of
maybe we should use the word bohemian joke or something along those lines. Like
just something like
traveler or
right,
you know,
like traveler.
Yeah.
Just someone like a modern day nomad, I guess.
There you
Someone who
go,
doesn't
nomad,
really have
nomadic.
like a solid home or anything. Just like draw furry porn and just get whatever I can from anyone.
Well, I mean, I think there are people who legitimately live like that, you know, out of RVs and whatnot, and they travel around doing oddball jobs or whatever. But I don't, I don't know if it would be beneficial overall. Like, you would get a lot of maybe very low worldly experience, but you probably wouldn't get a lot of like anything that would. I don't know, towards nirvana, I guess, or toward transcending.
And you're definitely right, and that's why I make that joke is because it's so like when I think about actual like religion, because I'm really into religion, you know, like that's something I talk about a lot. But I think it's I wouldn't even use the word nomad because when I was making the joke, I was making the joke as like I'm just gonna become an internet neckbeard who sits at home all day, lives with his mom, and like that's actually a viable option now. Is to just not be engaged with anything or be pseudo-engaged, like just go online to forums and then type like, oh, you did this or Biden did this.
It's sort of an offhands engagement where you don't have to confront anybody. It's just a forum or
exactly.
it's an impersonal way of getting an idea out there without necessarily having any feedback from that idea. Everybody is either going to be agreeing with you on that same forum or you know, they're blatantly disagreeing with you, and then nobody's going to change their mind.
Exactly, and that's exactly it. Is no one's going to change their mind. It's they're literally it's more of using politics and like that sort of discourse as a video game rather than an actual discourse.
Right. No, I don't think there's a lot of actual discourse going on. Even during the presidential debates recently, there wasn't any discourse going on. It was just them stating the same stuff that they've been stating over and over and over again, and jabbing at each other. Which, to set an example like that as the president of the potential presidents of the United States is just I find that a little bit abhorrent. Like you can't have a conversation. It's leading all the way down to the bottom. No one can have a conversation.
Right, exactly, and that's exactly it. Leads right to the bottom of like we disagree on stuff. We disagree on plenty of stuff, but we still talk about it, and then both of us make each other think about our position on things. But then when people do the whole jabbing thing, where it's like, oh, you're just a libtard, or like, oh, you put kids in cages or whatever. That like you said, it goes down to the bottom level where instead of having the discussion of who's like because no one person is right about everything, and if someone claims to be right about everything, that's like a bad thing.
Oh, that's a huge red flag.
Right, exactly. And then at that point, the only way to disagree with each other is through violence. It's like, okay, well, you disagree with me, I disagree with you. You're in my way of whatever I'm trying to do.
I agree, and people are taking this to a point where they're not militarizing, but they have a militant viewpoint about these things. They try and like not just categorize people, but shove anybody who doesn't agree with their stance into like these small boxes and these tiny almost cages in their head where they're like, you don't belong in my group, and thus you must get out.
Right, and that's the same thing with like podcasts. So people have the, you know, as soon as like a podcast is not friendly anymore, as soon as it doesn't get that viewership of like, oh, I'm comfortable listening to this, as soon as they say something like, just a personal view, whether like I'm more right than you are, so I see this on the right of like if anyone says anything that's like more left. About like redistributionism, like universal basic income, universal healthcare. Right. They're just like, oh, they're just a libtard, like, and they disagree with them and don't listen to them anymore.
Yeah.
They just turn it off.
They definitely turn it off. That's a good way to put it. They hear that and they're like, no, that's a wrong idea, which I find really odd especially when you listen to podcasts. Like, podcasts are the best example of echo chambers, in my opinion. So a lot of people sit down who have mostly similar views or similar enough where they can sort of talk around subjects without having to get into why they disagree with them. Right. They just say they disagree with them, and then they point out things that they think are better. Like, that's not necessarily a healthy thing. You need to know the other side.
Right.
Almost, if not better than yours.
And that is what I do like about Joe Rogan is he does have on like.
Well, he's a bit of an exception overall.
He is, right.
I mean, he's, what is it, the most popular one in the world?
He's the
or
most
something?
popular one in the world, but the reason he got there is because he's so open to talk with everyone.
And
so
he's fairly right-leaning, like, very right-leaning.
No, he's not right. He considers himself left-leaning.
Really?
Yeah, in terms of like universal healthcare, like all that. Most left like redistributionism he's into.
That's interesting. I had always thought he was more right-leaning. I guess it must have been just the few that I'd listened to, or he was echoing off of the person he was talking to.
Well, he might be more right. he considers himself left. Like he'll talk about that, but like you'll have people like Steven Crowder on,
right?
And they disagree. They disagree on the podcast. And the issue that I have a little bit is, it's not really an issue because I do still appreciate him doing it, but it's like us, we're doing the best guess type thing. It's just off the top of our head, and it's Steven Crowder who's trying to be more of a thought leader for his movement, trying to talk with another person, but then Joe Rogan's not. He's not super aware of like a lot of the nuances of a topic, so
right.
he gets mixed up on where the argument is in the first place.
Oh, so he doesn't like focus on the different parts of
right.
Of
so like an example is they were talking about pot on one episode, and Steven Crowder isn't against legalizing pot. He's basically just saying like pot is not the cure all or the be all end all of cures of everything.
Agreed.
And it's it's still a drug, like it's still like alcohol, a drug.
Right, of course.
And
I think it's super weird to me that people. Oh, I'm sorry. You were talking about Joe Rogan.
Yeah, you can do that because I'll finish this quick. And Joe Rogan saw that as like him just disagreeing with the legalization of pot, and that's what that's what he zeroed in on. He's like, well, why do you disagree with that? And he's like, well, no, it's not that. It's just it's not. It doesn't cure everything.
No,
yeah.
I totally agree, and what I was about to say is that a lot of people take it to that extreme. Mm-hmm. Everything seems to be in extremisms when you talk about when you talk about weed, when you talk about anything. If you're left, you're super left. If you're right, you're super right. If you believe in pot, you want it to be like this magic cure-all drug. If you don't, you don't want it on the streets at all. You want to imprison everybody. Mm-hmm. Like it's so wildly divisive, and I don't understand why people take those kinds of crazy stances. Well, even watching somebody as big as Joe Rogan having that fault is kind of disheartening because he has a million ears at all times. Like he's got people tuned into his thoughts constantly, and taking an extreme point of view, like a diametric viewpoint on any subject, or even against somebody who's saying, well, it's not bad, wouldn't mind legalizing it, it's that we just need to acknowledge it as a drug,
right?
And taking that to the fullest extent of, well, you hate pot, like that
right,
doesn't...
Exactly. And I also I don't even necessarily mind the fact that people are more extreme. It's the fact that it's becoming more of a fashion to be extreme, but without knowing what you're talking about. And I don't understand why that's such a bad thing to just say like, look, I don't know what I'm talking about, and that's fine, because if I don't know something, I'll be honest about something that I don't know, because then that gives someone else the opportunity who does know it to come in and say, hey, well, this is how this works, this is the aspects of it, and then if there is politics behind it, like if there's different angles to it, at least I know how the thing at the bottom of it works, so I myself can look at the different angles. Oh yeah, of course. And a lot of people are super, they even take not knowing things to an extreme. They either refuse to learn, which I find sort of amazing. I never used to meet people who would refuse to learn. Like, I don't want to know that. I've had people tell me that, like, I don't want to know that. I've had people so you're a millennial, you're older than me. Yes. And I am Gen Z. So I just came out of the school system. I've known a lot of people who are just like, I don't, like, we could be talking about something, they're just like, yeah, I don't want to know, but I don't want to talk about that. Or like I'll say something and I'm like, wait, you didn't like know that? And I may come across as a little bit like cunty when I'm like, you didn't know that? I don't think we can use that word.
but okay.
Yeah, but
Let's try for pretentious.
yeah, maybe pretentious. Yeah. Well, I'm not trying to put anyone down. It's mostly just like, well, if you don't know that, why are you making this an argument? Like, we could have a conversation rather than you trying to say that you're right, and then at the end of it be like, well, I don't even know what I'm talking about anyway. So
Right, isn't that the most frustrating thing? Like, then why are you arguing at all?
Yeah, exactly. And people really like being right. They like being correct.
Do. Yeah, that was the other point I was going to make, is they just believe themselves to be so right in an extreme way that it's not progressive for their own being.
Exactly. And that's where like those sort of like more uncomfortable topics come up with me and you. Is we talk about different like dictatorships, different like authoritarian regimes, and how today's society is starting to show parallels of just they don't understand the levels of malice that they're capable of if they just take their hands off the wheel and let someone else do their thinking for them.
No, it goes back to the ignorance thing. If you're ignorant of the way that history worked, or if you're ignorant of the way that we were talking about general education the other day, how people know more things, but they pay attention a lot less.
Yeah.
Like they don't know anything about politics. They don't know how it works. They don't know how, they don't know how to research their politicians, their views, their.
Right. And this is something that was interesting. Is like my girlfriend, she doesn't know anything about politics. Like she herself says that she's not really into it, but she knows that she doesn't like communism because just I talk about communism a lot, and
so she doesn't like it because of you.
Right, exactly. Well, because
Zach, the Red Scare.
Yeah, it's just like I'll talk about it and like how it doesn't work, and then I'll show her examples of how that doesn't work. But then she'll talk about things like with Biden. Like she'll be like, well, yeah, but Biden's gonna tax people who make above $400,000, so that way everyone else can have health care. And she on the surface level, she disagrees with communism and redistributionism, but then because she doesn't know the nuances of that, when someone who's actually advocating for redistributionism, she's like, oh yeah, that's okay. And then I'll explain to her further, like, well, yeah, it is for people over 400,000, but like, if people don't
it becomes a stepping stone to other things in the future, or could. There's an argument that says, communism could work, and socialism, redistributionism, universal healthcare, all these things could work, and they do work in other places. But there's a uniqueness to America in that we are one of, if not the largest first world country, both physically and with population. Like it just doesn't work. We're very spread out. We're very different. Ecosystems. We have many different ecosystems, many different.
We have different philosophies too, especially in terms of individual freedom, and that's what I love about America is we are given the freedom to take control of our own lives, and that shows in.
At a certain point, I feel like that freedom thought is almost poisonous to some people because they take it to mean that. For example, the most free. I'm sure maybe you've heard that speech where we're not even the most free country in the world, etc. People still to this day.
Is that like the argument where like we may be free in terms of what we can do, but then we don't have like the finances to pursue our dreams?
Yeah, it's basically like that. I feel like people take that. They're like, oh, America is free, and they legitimately don't think other first world countries are also free. Like it's sort of a weird, again, ignorance factor.
Right. And
in that freedom.
When I say the freedom, what I mean more so is we're in America. We're kind of just thrown to the wolves from the get go. Like as soon as we're born, we're just there. There's not a lot of government help unless you grow up in more of a area where there is a lot of government help. But even then, it's.
I guess it would be more like your parents wouldn't have as much support. Like you even though you have a kid, there's no extra things for you. You just need to
you just need to take care of your kid and figure it out basically. And like that does kind of suck, but the issue is you can't even bring up maybe where the suckiness comes from and what policies are in place that cause that suckiness to start in the first place.
That's fair. I definitely think, to a degree, we are a little bit more based than most first world countries. A lot of them, again, they have universal health care. They have
Right.
you know stipends for what is that, maternity, etc. Things like that. And we have a little bit of those. Like, to be fair,
Right.
a lot of people, they still take this argument way too far. They're like, well, we don't have any help for
Right. Right.
you know, pregnant mothers and whatnot, and that's not
That's not
necessarily
true,
true,
right.
but it may cost a lot more, that's for sure.
Right, and part of the issue that I have with that is, like, when you look at other first world countries like Europe, they have the more like Bernie Sanders approach to like socialism, where that's actual redistributionism. Which, like, okay, if
But
we're-
there's nothing inherently wrong with having social programs. Like, Social Security is technically a social program.
Right,
It's a
and-
socialist program.
and I don't necessarily mind like giving the wheel over to like a socialist to do things like that, but we don't have that. We have people like Joe Biden, who's this like middle area. Where
Right,
it's like
these-
it's the most inefficient
They're like
parts.
aristocratic Democrats
Yes.
instead of like, or socialists rather, than actually being more social. That's
Right.
why a lot of people fell in line behind Bernie Sanders, because he had positive programs for already existing socialist programs in the U.S. People don't realize, like,
Right.
we have a lot of
We
socialist
yeah.
programs.
It's just
Your
the way
retirement is a socialist program. Like,
And then that's my argument against socialism is we're not going to get Social Security.
no.
We pay into it, and it's just so it's not
That's
sustainable.
that's more of a mismanagement issue than it is like
right.
than anything else. Because we shouldn't have reached a point where we're needing to dip into people's
Right. Right.
retirement.
Exactly. It's like it's like if your business or whatever company you're working for is letting you pay 401k, but then they're like, we're just gonna take it from you. And I mean, I guess that is kind of how 401k works. Like, you are.
has in the past.
Yeah. But like, or even maybe a better example is like you paying for healthcare. Like, they'll say like, okay, well, we need gloves or we need more protection equipment because of COVID. We're gonna start taking half of your money that's going into your healthcare, and that's gonna be ours now. But you're like, well, wait, that's going towards me. That's going towards my healthcare, not the company's healthcare. Like, don't you have your own money to pay
Don't
that?
you have your own money, goddammit?
And then that's the government or that's your company saying, no, we don't have the money.
Yeah,
Like-
exactly. Like, just admitting that they're going under.
Yeah.
Which is, I mean, it's a huge red flag. It's a good example to use a company, especially in America, since everything's so privatized.
So corporate, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, when you get those red flags, you need to jump ship. Is usually like
Exactly.
the thought, but you can't really jump ship on a country, right?
No,
So
you can't, and that's where some of my more extreme ideas come in when I'm talking to Hunter. Is like, yeah, I just want to start my own country, and Hunter's like, well, how do you plan on doing that? And I'm like, well, fuck you, Hunter. Like, I do what I want. That's
I do appreciate that you started like actually thinking about it. You came to me with that I guess metropolis or
Yeah.
agropolis idea,
Mhm.
and you really tried to break it down.
I have a sustainable plan for everything that I want to build, and like
There's a lot of details. I feel like there's just not gone over yet. Like, I still feel like it's an incomplete idea.
it is incomplete, but like I'm also like that's my issue with most politicians or like the discourse in general is, even though my ideas are incomplete, they're still complete enough to really make you think about how sustainable our own government is. And
Well, I mean,
how-
at that point, wouldn't everybody just make their own country anyway then?
Well, originally, like, that was kind of the idea of United States of America is, so there's the federal government, which is in charge of, like, all the overarching shit. Like, maybe COVID. COVID would be a great federal example to just say, like, all right, well, now masks are mandatory federally, so, do it.
Right.
Or, like,
Agreed.
a war. That's the whole country's stake. But then for the little things like education, like healthcare, like all that, that's the community's job to have a system that allows people to work, that allows people to, trade, and build a surplus for themselves.
I definitely agree with that, and that's probably one of my more right views, is that states definitely need to be more independent.
Mhm.
I don't agree that that we are. I agree that we are a country, obviously, but
Yeah.
we are so diversified from
Mhm.
like just where we are, New Mexico, all
Right.
the way to like look at Maine. Maine
Mhm.
has a totally
Yeah.
different
Yeah,
economy.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
we would never be able to take our government and put it over there because it
Mhm.
would just not work, or vice versa.
And I do feel bad sometimes because I did grow up in New Mexico. I grew up here, and New Mexico's culture is very very different.
Oh, it's
Like whenever I go
hugely
to go to
diverse.
Texas or go to California, they're different places. It feels like when you go into Europe and you can drive just a couple hundred miles and you're in a completely different country. It's that same idea, except we're a much bigger country.
Right, we're
There's
all
a
one
lot,
country.
yeah, where there's a lot bigger space in between. There's different cultures in each area,
Oh,
even
definitely.
between towns. Like look at the culture in Rio Rancho to Albuquerque
Oh,
to
definitely.
Santa Fe.
But also look at the actual differences in those cities. Rio Rancho is extremely nice. Giant, broad roads,
Mhm.
big, huge buildings, large,
Exactly.
infrastructure everywhere. And Albuquerque is really dense and old and has a bunch of
Yeah.
like twisting roads and tiny neighborhoods that are
Right.
secluded. And then Santa Fe's a mess, honestly. That place, you can't even go straight in a road.
No.
They all curve.
The thing about Santa Fe is like, when you have like Rio Rancho and Albuquerque, if you have a shitty car, like all the cars are shitty. All the
Yeah,
cars, are,
everything's
like, yeah,
bad.
everyone has shitty shit. So like, it's more designed to just be that kind of driving. But when you go to Santa Fe, everyone has nice cars. They can sit in their car for a long time. They can just let it idle. But if you're in a car in New Mexico, there's a chance that idling your car at just
Yeah.
a stop sign, it could die
Because
right
it's
there.
at 98 degrees outside.
Right, exactly. And then it's
And it becomes so commonplace too, because you know,
Mhm.
I guess that's kind of going back to the whole the U.S. and the states. Like it's kind of true. Like it becomes every day where we watch somebody like die in the middle of the road. Not a person,
Yeah, a car
person's
die.
car die in
Mhm.
the middle of the road, and you're just like, oh well, they're gonna have to push it or they're gonna start it up, and you're just
Mhm.
like, okay. But in other parts of the country, that would be like, oh God, are they all right? Like,
Yeah, are they
holy-
all right? Like that stops traffic, and they're
Yeah.
like, hey, like yeah, that's a yeah, exactly. That's a experience that they're not prepared for. So that's what I disagree with, like the federal government in general, like federal law.
Agreed.
Is it's just it doesn't have the same intimacy as communities.
Oh, and it doesn't do very well with its blanketing. Like the
Mhm.
blankets for even California, for example, do not apply here. We don't
Mhm.
have the population. We don't have the exportation. We
Right.
don't like the most that we really export is tourism, and that's
That
what
is
we
kind
do.
yeah.
Like that's how we survive for the most part.
Over here, you're either in the military, in a car shop, Intel.
There you go. Yeah, one of those giant corporations that just puts their stuff out here because
Yeah,
it's cheap.
because it's cheap and it's
Super
the
cheap.
desert, so you have just mass amounts of land, and that's it. Like literally a car shop, or a bank, or
We do
like,
have quite a large credit union base. I
Yeah.
believe we're within the top 10 at Sandia Federal or something like that, in the nation. So, I mean but that again that goes back to the military thing. It's a military credit union, or was for
Right.
Sandia Federal shit.
exactly, and like that's where our culture comes from. But it's not where it comes from because there's a deep culture to Albuquerque and just New Mexico
Well, there's
in
a
general.
deep Hispanic culture everywhere. Our buildings are modeled after
Yeah.
them. We have
Mhm.
Mexican restaurants everywhere. Chips and salsa is normal at Chili's here. Like
Yeah,
what?
and like I like it. Like I love New
Oh
Mexico.
yeah, I love
And
Mexican culture.
but the issue that I have is there are other cultures here, like nuclear culture, like just nuclear energy in general. That's something that people kind of get scared to talk about because they have this sort of like demonized view of nuclear
I
material.
mean, to be fair, the first atomic bomb in the world was dropped here, so.
No, I yeah, exactly, and like that's why I've seen the first drop site. I've been to all the museums. I've been to Alamogordo, White Sands, and
Yep.
like I'm less afraid of it. Like I grew up that's with it, and I don't that's like a topic that I think people should be less afraid to like talk about.
I agree. Overall, I'd like to get into like more specific topics for the future,
Right.
like with the podcast, not just an overall thing. But you know, It was a decent first episode. How long are we gonna generally make these?
This is the first episode, so this is kind of just an introduction. So we can keep it around like right now the 30-minute mark, but then we can go anywhere from 30 to an hour.
Okay, cool. I'm down for that. Yeah, well, it'll also depend on the topic, because even though we may get specific, a lot of those topics, they end up being pretty short overall.
Right. Well, and like we can, we'll also take suggestions. Like I would, if someone wanted us to talk about something specific, like, so I have a friend named Rocky, and he's.
You have a friend named Rocky?
Yeah.
Holy crap.
R-O-Q-U-E.
No.
Yes, I swear that's how you spell
Rocky?
it. Rocky. Yeah.
No.
Yes, I do. And like I love him. And the reason I love him so much is because he was in school with me. He was a year younger than me in school,
right.
But we had a couple classes together because he was like advanced math, so he was like a year ahead.
So he's smarter than you.
He's definitely smarter than me. And like whenever I say things, he hears what I say and he's like, "Wow, I don't know what you're talking about, but I'm gonna I'm gonna store that away in my head." And then he'll hear other people talking about things and he'll say like, "Well, no, you're like dumb, like you're wrong." But then he'll think back to me and he's like, "No, that can't be right. Like that's way too crazy." So he'll come back to me and he'll say like, "What did you mean when you said this?" And like I'll say whatever crazy shit, and he'll be like, "Okay, well you're going a little bit far, but I do see like the trail you're taking to get there," and he'll think about things, and he'll think about like what we talked about, how people don't go further into ideas or go further into what they disagree with.
Well, yeah, definitely. We could have a definitely bringing back old subjects isn't out of question. If you've come to a new conclusion or
Mm-hmm.
take a suggestion and we readdress something, that's not an issue. I don't have a problem with that.
You good? We want to wrap it up?
I don't know. We haven't prepared a topic, to be fair.
Right. The topic for this is basically just what we're going to be talking about, and I feel like that was a proper introduction. I don't know if we introduced ourselves. I'm Zach.
My name is Hunter.
And
Hunter. Sorry, Southwest here.
Yeah. Hunter.
Hunter.
Yeah.
Overall, yeah, I think a lot of it's probably going to end up being probably fairly political, maybe a little religious ideology in there.
Right.
I am not religious by any means, just for the record.
And I'm like very, very religious. As not necessarily religious in the sense of like in an organized religion. It's just I'm very esoteric in the way I talk and the ideas that I want to explore.
Like making a cult.
No. No, that's
That's a real thing.
No, I'm not trying to get called out on the first episode. Okay, well, on that note, we'll wrap it up. We'll talk more later.
Awesome. All right, signing out, guys. Goodbye.